Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a fascinating and honestly kind of ruthless breakdown of Arthur Schopenhauer's tactics for dealing with completely irrational arguments. If you've ever felt just totally drained after trying to explain a perfectly logical point to someone who absolutely refuses to listen, well, you're in exactly the right place. We're going to explore a very specific architecture that some of history's sharpest minds have used to completely disarm what the source calls the willfully ignorant. And the kicker? They do it without ever actually giving them the gift of the truth. So let's start right here. Why do intelligent people constantly lose arguments to those who are objectively wrong? The source pegs this as pretty much the ultimate frustration for anybody who relies on logic. I mean, you know the scenario, right? You're in a boardroom, maybe a family dinner, and someone is speaking with this absolute, unshakable confidence about something they completely misunderstand. You gather your facts, lay out a flawless argument, and you just expect the light of reason to wash over them. But nope, they double down. You leave completely depleted. So why exactly do you lose when the objective facts are literally on your side?
Well, you lose because you're caught in the intelligence trap. The source posits that intelligent people are operating under a fatal delusion here. Basically, you're projecting your own mental operating system onto a machine that just cannot run it. You assume, hey, if I just present the right evidence, they'll analyze it and adjust their worldview. But the explainer argues that trying to educate someone who aggressively insists on their own ignorance, it's not noble. It's actually a form of intellectual suicide. You see, Schopenhauer famously despised naive optimism. He pointed out this massive gap between what we think an argument is and what it actually is in reality. The myth is that people argue to find objective truth, but the reality? They argue to establish dominance and protect their ego, period. When you drop logic onto a highly irrational person, they don't see a fun opportunity to learn. No, they see a direct threat to their ego. And as the source notes, that ego will heavily armor itself and literally burn down the world before ever admitting it's wrong. And what's wild is that modern psychology backs Schopenhauer up perfectly on this. Enter the Dunning-Kruger effect. It's that cognitive bias where people with low ability possess this almost hallucinatory level of confidence. But the source really stresses that just knowing the definition isn't enough. You gotta grasp the gravity of it. Ignorance isn't just some passive, empty vessel waiting to be filled with your brilliant knowledge. No, it acts as an active, aggressive defense mechanism. To break this down further, the source draws on Daniel Kahneman's research to explain the deep translation error happening in these debates. It's literally a clash of systems. You've got System 1 thinking, fast, emotional, totally instinctual. And then there's System 2, slow, deliberate, logical, and nuanced. The highly irrational person is effectively a prisoner of System 1. They grab a fast emotion, attach it to an opinion, and just call it a fact. You, on the other hand, are trying to run System 2 on them. You're offering all this data and nuance to someone who is operating purely on instinct. Which brings us to this incredible quote that perfectly captures the source's argument about this whole translation error. You are speaking mathematics to a barking dog. Just think about the sheer economics of attention for a second. You are burning immense caloric energy trying to craft these perfectly reasoned arguments, while your opponent is spending absolutely zero energy refusing them. They aren't draining you by outsmarting you, they're draining you by outlasting you, basically dragging you right down into the mud of their own cognitive limitations. Section 1. Schopenhauer's survival tactics, weaponizing the momentum of absurdity. Okay, so if logic fails and reasoning is a trap, how are you actually supposed to win? Well, Schopenhauer suggests we handle this friction by weaponizing it, using a very specific three-step process. It's similar to the reductio ad absurdum tactic. The source suggests step 1, completely stop disagreeing. When someone throws out a ridiculous premise, like say a coworker claiming all modern art is a scam and literally anyone could do it, don't argue art history. Go to step 2, agree completely and violently. Say something like, you are absolutely right. Since it's so easy, we should quit our jobs today, buy some paint, and we'll be millionaires by Friday. By step 3, you've accelerated their idea to such catastrophic absurdity that their brain just short-circuits. You didn't beat them with logic, you forced them to stare at the actual destination of their own thought process, which forces them to backpedal and suddenly inject the nuance themselves. But you might be asking, why go to all these links? Well, because the hidden costs of cognitive taxation are severe. The source warns that spending your time navigating a chaotic, irrational mind throws your brain into absolute overdrive. You're constantly trying to predict unpredictable reactions, you're suppressing your own frustration, you're walking on eggshells. And the sustained mental taxation, it actually degrades your own decision-making abilities over time. You are essentially letting a parasite feed right off your intellectual capital. Now, Schopenhauer was notoriously solitary, and he applied this really harsh mathematical view to human interaction. He originally wrote, "To marry is to have your rights and double your duties." The explainer brilliantly adapts this formula to everyday arguments, pointing out that engaging with a fool halves your intelligence and doubles your exhaustion. It's basically a transaction where you're trading your gold for dirt. Which brings us right to Schopenhauer's famous porcupine dilemma. Picture this. On a freezing night, porcupines huddle together for warmth. But, of course, their quills prick each other, so they're forced apart again. They're basically trapped between freezing in isolation or bleeding in intimacy. To master this psychological distance, Schopenhauer recommends creating an avatar. Because you can't just avoid difficult people entirely, right? So you bring this polite, detached persona to the interaction. The avatar just smiles, says, interesting perspective, and gives the irrational person absolutely nothing to attack. Section 2. Managing Fools in Power, the Danger of the Frightened Beast. Now, what happens when this irrational mind is actually the one signing your paycheck or holding the keys to your next promotion? According to the source, when a person of mediocre intellect acquires power, their entire psychology rests on a fault line of deep insecurity. Conspicuous intelligence in the presence of mediocrity is an unpardonable sin. If you walk into their domain and just flex your brilliance, you aren't proving your worth. Actually, scratch that, it's worse. You are holding a painful mirror up to their inadequacy. And a frightened beast in power? They'll shatter the mirror just to avoid looking at the reflection. They'll attack your character instead, calling you uncooperative or, not a team player. To survive a foolish leader, the explainer highlights this incredible historical timeline of Sima Yi's submission gambit. Sima Yi was a brilliant strategist, but he served under a deeply foolish and envious regent named Cao Shuang. If Sima Yi showed off his intellect, he'd be executed. Period. So, month 1, he fakes severe illness and senility. By month 2, the regent's spies report back on his pathetic, weak state. This completely anesthetizes the leader's ego. Month 3 rolls around, the regent feels totally superior and drops his defenses. And then, month 4, Sima Yi drops the act entirely and executes a lightning-fast military coup. He traded a temporary scratch to his pride for absolute unchecked maneuverability. Section 3. The Power of Detachment, Releasing the Arrogance of Empathy. So why do we continuously return to these exhausting arguments even when we know exactly how to avoid them? The source boils it down to the arrogance of empathy. You keep engaging because, deep down, you feel sorry for them. You think if you can just show them the flaw in their logic, you'll be their savior. You'll save them from their own cognitive limitations. But the explainer argues that this is actually a really dangerous bleeding heart philosophy. Trying to forcefully drag someone into the light of truth doesn't make you look like a healer. It makes you look like an invader, attacking the warm, cozy fortress of their unearned confidence. Highlighting a genuinely ruthless assessment of human potential, the source shares this hard truth. If a person is a fool today, they will be a fool tomorrow. The explainer argues that accepting this fact requires a sort of emotional amputation. We have to stop trying to endlessly upgrade irrational people with our logic. Instead, we need to start managing them the exact same way you'd manage dangerous heavy machinery. You keep your hands out of the gears, and you stay safely behind the lines. Ultimately, this demands a final Machiavellian shift in our own psychology. We literally have to break our addiction to being correct. You see, intelligence is winning the argument and knowing you're right. But power? Power is winning the objective while they think they won the argument. The truly dangerous, effective minds out there don't play for the applause of a debate. They play for outcomes. Knowing all of this, we're left with a pretty powerful question. Are you ready to surrender your need to change them and finally step out of the arena? The very second you let go of the desire to be understood by people who are literally incapable of understanding, all that exhaustion just vanishes. You stop being a participant in their chaos, and you become the architect of your own peace. A really provocative thought to leave you with today. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I truly hope it completely changes how you navigate your next impossible argument.